Romans chapter 5, verse 3 through 4, Paul said it this way: "We can rejoice too when we run into problems and trials, for we know that they are" what? Now, that doesn't sound right to me. You know, it's one of those verses in the Bible that just, I hear that, it's like, really? Problems are good for me? You know, how many of us really think of a problem that way? Oh, fun, I have another problem. Can't wait for the next one to happen. Really? No, we're not that way, are we? You know, usually we have a problem, we go, oh man, another thing when is this going to end? How come I have to go through these problems all the time? You know, and that's the way we are as human beings. But God says these problems and trials are actually good for us. How? They help us learn to be patient. And patience develops strength of character in us and helps us trust God more each time we use it, until finally our hope and faith are strong and steady. Now you got to think of it this way. The most important thing of all is not to focus on the problem. If you focus on the problems in your life, you're going to get discouraged. You're going to get disappointed. So instead of focusing on the problem, you have to focus on the result of the problem. You've got to focus on what are the benefits, what are the good things that come from these problems. And Paul actually tells us step by step in this passage exactly what we need to know in order not to get discouraged, and so that we can go through the circumstances of life and learn from them so that we can grow and become more like Jesus Christ. What are those things? Well, first of all, he tells us, he says, know this about problems. Know that they're good. So just remember that. Know that they're good. And then the second thing he tells us is, know this, that from these problems, there's always something you can learn. There's something you can learn. Primarily, he says you can learn patience. How many of you love to learn patience? Yeah, right. None of us, right? You know, especially this way, through the problems. You pray for a patience in your life. What does God do? Brings the problem into your life. Why did I get this problem? Because you prayed for patience. That's the reason. Just stop that. You know. So God says you want to be able to grow in your patience. You want to be able to grow in your character. You want to be able to learn those things. You're going to have to go through problems, because that's the end result. So you don't focus on the problem, you focus on the end result. What's going to happen? What else does he tell us about problems? What does he say that in this passage that they're good for? Well, he tells us that they help us trust God more. So the more problems that you have in your life, the more your faith is going to grow. The more you're going to learn to trust God. Think about this. If you didn't have any problems whatsoever, no problems at all, ever in your life, you'd never understand just how good and wonderful and powerful God is to be able to solve your problem. So when you have a problem, God reveals himself to you. God shows himself. He shows up. He's present. He's there. You're thinking, and I know this, I've been there too, we're usually thinking, where's God? I've got this problem. God's vanished. God's disappeared. God's not around. No, he's right there. He's right there with you. And he just wants you to trust him. He just wants you to have faith in him. Paul goes on and he says, this is something else you can know about problems, and that is that they will strengthen your hope and your faith. Strengthening of your hope and your faith. What's hope? Something you look forward to. Amen? So if you're always looking at the problem, now, the present, you're never going to see the end result, which is more hope and more faith. So whenever you have a problem, just focus on the result. Look at the hope it's going to bring. Look at the faith it's going to bring. And then the last thing he says you can know about these problems is that they help you to become a steadier Christian. A steadier Christian. So those are some of the things, that's a secret, of just being able to look at your circumstances in a way that will help you to grow. Instead of focusing on the problem, focus on the result. You focus on the benefits. Does that make sense? So it's kind of like what I brought with me today is this piñata. How many of you ever used a piñata before? Okay, so, they're fun, aren't they? Piñatas are pretty cool. You get to be able to whack them. You work out all your frustration on them and all that kind of stuff. You blindfold, the person. You give them a bat or a pole or a stick or something. Stand back, and then just let them whack it, And usually what happens to the piñata? The head falls off, the ear falls off, the leg falls off. It gets battered. All this stuff, the mache is all over the ground, right? And it's just, the holes are all through it. It's getting beat to a pulp. That's kind of the way it is in life. I want you to think of this piñata as life. Your life, my life. You see, you're going through the circumstances of life and you're experiencing the problems. And what's happening? You're getting beaten up. The world is beating you up. The devil is having a field day on you. He's battering you. He's bruising you. How many of you have ever felt like that at the end of the day? You've been beaten, battered, and bruised. Yeah, spiritually, you've been through the meat grinder, so to speak, spiritually. But here's the great thing about the problems. It's just like the piñata. Once you've broken the piñata open, what happens? All this candy comes flying out, right? You got all this great sweet stuff, and the kids are running around and picking it up, and it's a great thing. And that's what the problems in life will do for you and for me. It will develop some great, sweet things that will help you to get through life and grow and become more like Jesus, and it'll be sweet. I know it feels bitter. I know it feels terrible. I know it hurts, but don't focus on that. Focus on the end result. Isn't that what we do with the piñata? We beat it up. Why? Because we want what's inside of it. What does God do? God does the same thing. He has us go through the circumstances of life, the problems of life. Why? Because He wants us to get to what is supposed to be inside of us. That sweet stuff. The character, the hope, the faith, the trust. That's great stuff, amen? So think of those problems as that piñata. Will you do that? All right.